So I went to Australia and Provence and all over the place looking for areas where the value of wine is just off the charts. In Italy, Tuscany, Piedmont, they're very cachet brand name wine regions. But if you go south to Sicily, you can get some incredible values. Same thing in France, from Bordeaux, Burgundy, go down to the Languedoc. Even in California, Napa and Sonoma are the brand names, but go down to Paso Robles. You're going to get better value.
Do you have a thirst to learn about wine? Do you love stories about wonderfully obsessive people, hauntingly beautiful places, and amusingly awkward social situations? Well, that's the blend here on the Unreserved Wine Talk podcast. I'm your host, Natalie McLean, and each week I share with you unfiltered conversations with celebrities in the wine world, as well as confessions from my own tipsy journey as I write my third book on this subject. I'm so glad you're here. Now pass me that bottle, please, and let's get started. Welcome to episode 179. Why does Italy make such a fantastic wine destination to visit? Which underpriced wines for their quality should you try next? How can you successfully navigate walls of bottles in a liquor store? And which simple technique can you use to improve your tasting skills and learn more about wine? You'll hear all those stories and tips in my chat with Janina Doyle, host of the Eat, Sleep, Wine, Repeat podcast. She's interviewing me, and we get into all sorts of fun stories and shenanigans. Now, on a personal note, before we dive into the show with the continuing story of publishing my new wine memoir, Wine Witch on Fire, Rising from the Ashes of Divorce, Depression, and Drinking Too Much. I recently attended my first online book club meeting to chat about my memoir. They had volunteered to be beta readers, and this was a live feedback session. So as their faces popped up on the screen, I felt a ball of panic rising in my throat. I had set the view to gallery mode so I could see all of them in their little individual squares. This was a group of women who love books and wine, my people, right? Still, my voice was shaky as I started leading them through a wine tasting before we dove into the book. I wished I had poured scotch into my glass rather than Pinot Noir. Perhaps that's because memoir is so personal. So when they talk about what they thought of the narrator or what she should have done or shouldn't have done, they're talking about me. And similarly, the characters in my book are my family members. As they started asking questions and as I drank more of my wine, I started to calm down, though my cheeks had turned permanently beet red from my rosacea, which flares when I'm excited or stressed. My favorite moment, though, of the entire evening was when one woman said, quote, "The things you said, even the words you used, sound exactly like my friend who's going through a divorce right now and dealing with depression. She really needs to hear this." End quote. That is the point of my memoir. It's not a self-help book, but I think it can help those who have gone through similar situations by putting words to those feelings and thoughts. I think when we can name the chaos we feel inside us, it has less power over us. It's no longer a dark, tangled mess. As we name what happened to us and share our stories, we start to make sense of our lives, and that, for me, is the meaning of both my memoir and my life. Have you ever felt relief from finally finding the words to say how you feel? Let me know. All right, as promised, I'll share a beta reader review with you now, and this one comes from Joy in Wisconsin. Quote, "Readers won't be able to help themselves. They'll fall into an examination of their own trials and experiences while reading this memoir and finding themselves in a stew pot of emotions running from anger to joy to sorrow. What the narrator lives through is universal in the book of humanity. We're all covered by this patchwork quilt of challenges, tragedies, and successes. We may each have our own story, but we share the same emotional responses. The history of human experiences is a constant. Hearing the stories of others is how we can cope and change and grow." For me, worthwhile reading needs to be a combination of thought-provoking and entertaining. I need to relate to something in the work, whether it's the story itself, the message, or the characters. This book gave me pause to ponder my relationship in the world of authors and publishers because I'm an author. But there's something to consider for every profession out there. I've been a news reporter, paralegal, high school, college educator. Sexism is everywhere in the working world, so increasing awareness and how to handle it are both important for progress. Women of all kinds, whether they face personal loss or professional discrimination, will resonate with this memoir. I also see men in the audience, especially ones with open minds and compassionate souls. The narrator is a divided self, seeking to unite those pieces into one healthy being. She is witty, sometimes sarcastically charming from a savvy professional viewpoint. I'd give this 5 stars out of 5. Thank you, Joy. I've posted a link to a blog post called Diary of a Book Launch in the show notes at nataliemaclean.com/179. This is where I share more behind-the-scenes story about the journey of taking this memoir from idea to publication. If you want a more intimate insider seat beside me on this journey, please let me know you'd like to become a beta reader and get a sneak peek at the manuscript. Email me at natalie@nataliemaclean.com. Okay, on with the show.
Natalie MacLean. I mean, she's only gone and won herself 4 James Beard Foundation Journalism Awards. So we will be talking to her about her 2 wine books that are out on the market. You'll get to listen to incredible stories of what it's like to be down in the cellars of DRC, Domaine della Romani Conti. And you'll get a whole load of tips from organising tastings with friends, some great cheese and wine pairings, and what you should be doing when in a wine shop to make the right decision. I have to say my favourite part is right at the end when Natalie pairs famous books with wines. So you must stay to the end to see what she picks and why. So grab a glass of wine and get ready to laugh along with us. Hello, Natalie, and thank you for joining me today.
I'm so glad to be here with you, Janina.
Doing my research, I kind of feel like you're Canadian wine royalty. What do you think of that title?
Well, as long as it doesn't have any responsibility, I'd rather be like a rogue princess or something that doesn't really have to do all those formal duties. It's like, that's no fun.
No, you have a lot of responsibility. No, with all your wine knowledge comes a lot of responsibility.
The crown is heavy.
Okay, put the crown down for a second, pick up a glass and let's continue. But
yes, please.
I want you to tell me a little of your story because you didn't start drinking at a young age or, the dinner table with parents. This is your husband's doing, right?
Yes. Well, I like to say I started drinking when I met my husband and I haven't found a reason to stop. But
did he make you drink? He drove you to drink?
Yeah, that's right. He is my ex, by the way, but that's a whole other different story.
Can we fit in another podcast?
Yes. Get into the juicy bits.
Absolutely. Wine and relationships. Okay, right.
Exactly.
So that husband, moving on, carrying on.
Yes, moving on. Right. So we attended graduate school together. We both did an MBA. So it wasn't really till we got out of school and had some money to get fancy that we actually started drinking wine. I couldn't cook. He didn't like to. So we went out to restaurants a lot and started ordering wine. I do remember the first trip we took. I wasn't a wine writer. I was in high-tech marketing. And we went to Italy. And it was so beautiful. It's a feast for the senses, from those slanting amber rays of the sun to the tall cypress trees, the terracotta buildings, and of course, the food and wine. It was just glorious and it was endless. And I just thought, I want to live in this world. And so the only way I could take it back with me was pretty much through a bottle. So we took as many bottles as we could sneak away with, clinking through customs, going, yep, just got one bottle.
Anything to declare?
Nope.
No, definitely not.
Clink, clink, clink. But those bottles, when we opened them back home, even in our rainy apartment in Toronto, they did bring back the memories. And we weren't quite at the Mediterranean, but I just love the experience. And it turned me on to wine, literally, because I grew up in a Scottish family from the East Coast, Nova Scotia. So it was beer and whiskey. Wine wasn't part of the family table. So this
Yeah.
was really my introduction to wine.
And now I love this title. I feel like I should steal this title. You have named yourself, which is probably better than wine royalty. So the crown's off. The chief of wine happiness. I mean, fabulous. Now
Thank you.
Well, I'm stealing it. So you have written incredible wine books that have got you awards. You are on television giving people advice, running online wine courses. So you're doing a whole load in the spectrum of delivering wine excitement and knowledge. So what is a typical day for you? Does that exist?
Yeah, well, probably like you, Janina, there is no typical day, but I can generalize. I'm good at that. So all Chardonnays taste like this. No, but I usually get up pretty early, like around 5 in the morning. And
yes, circadian rhythm. I am with you on this. Yes.
I'm an early riser. Then again, I go to bed at 9, when everybody's just getting going. But anyway, I find my best brain is in the morning. So that's when I do writing, for magazine columns, for my online food and wine pairing courses. I'm now working on a third book, a memoir. So I use my brain in the morning. And then afternoons are more for physical stuff like running errands, working out to keep off the calories, because there's a natural dip in my energy. And I think for a lot of people, that sort of mid to late afternoon dip. But I come out of it around 4 or 5. And that's when I do my tasting. So anywhere between 10 and sometimes up to 30 wines, I'll taste, enter reviews for the website. Those go on my mobile apps that have the barcode scanner and the front label optical reader.
Yes, very smart.
Yeah. So, that trying to keep up with the wines that I get, the number of samples. I get no pity about that. Oh, it's such a hard job.
No, genuinely, sometimes it's really stressful when you realize as well, you've committed to specific deadlines where things need to be written about or tasted. And you're like, oh my God. And also from my perspective, I actually, unless I don't like the bottle, I really want to drink the wine. Some winemaker has put his heart and soul into that bottle. And for me, when I get given a whole bottle, to taste a sample and then be like, oh, I've got 10 bottles open and, oh, well, I'll just pour it down the sink. I'm like, no, I need to coordinate my timings to make sure I drink those bottles and have them with food as well and really get the most out of each one. So then for me, yes, sob story. It's very stressful.
It is. People just don't know how much we suffer. Like our livers for the people. But when my partner of 10 years now, post-divorce, when he first saw me pouring wine down the drain, he thought it was a wine crime. It's like, what are you doing? What are you doing? So at first, he made me cork them all and he would distribute them to friends. But subsequently, I now have a team of people who review on my website. So I just take the ounce or two, recork for them, and they come pick them up. He's very sad that things have turned out that way, but it's like, you know what? You've got a lot of benefits. Let's not be too mopey here.
There's enough wine around.
Exactly. Oh. We live in a castle of wine. So anyway.
No, I've already mentioned, I touched on the point that you are on TV. So you're on CTV, which for the Social, it's called, right? For many of us in the UK who are listening to this podcast, it's not just any daytime television show. It's like the largest daytime television show accounts. Just go for the best. So you're on there and the CTV news and on morning shows, educating the world. I mean, this has got to be so much fun. Is this the peak or is this just one of the things you enjoy doing?
Well, yes, I'm past peak. I'm on the decline now, but you've caught me before I've slid into the gutter. No, the Social, that was fun. Like I've been on that show now since 2013. So that's 7-8 years. The Social is modeled after The View, if anybody's familiar with the show The View in the States, in that they have 4 celebrity hosts who talk about like a variety of issues, often quite controversial. They all have guests and so on. And it's filmed before a live studio audience. And it's live aired out to 3.6 million viewers across the country. So there's no taping, there's no editing, you're live. So
has something gone wrong ever?
Well, yeah, for sure. So what happens with the Social, they're more integrated with social media than The View. So they used to have live Twitter comments and other comments from social media on the
Okay.
screen reacting to whatever was going on the show. And so I just cold called the editor, pitched her on pairing wine with fast food. She loved that idea for the first segment. And so I thought, well, this could go really well, or I could get shamed on national television because there had been more than a few people on social media, trolls and whatnot, who had told me that was a ridiculous topic to write about because I had written about it before. However, I love wine and food pairing. It's the thing I focus on in my wine and food online pairing courses because I think it makes wine more accessible. Anyway, so we're on the set. It's live. There's about a dozen cameras going in and out, and there's blinding lights, and there's hosts on either side. And it's like, I could melt right now into a puddle of neuroses, or I can forget about all that, focus on the audience, and try to give them a good time. So it did go well, thank God. They were throwing me questions, pizza, hamburgers, what goes with all of this? And we're having fun. And as we walked off the stage in the set, it was like, I felt like a deflated balloon, but in a good way. It was just such a relief. But, there have been other times when things have gone wrong, like on CTV News, which is also live. I was trying to saber champagne. So, why not put yourself in a really stressful situation? And we had to go to break. And the end part was me trying to saber this thing. And I had already tried it twice and it wasn't working. And the host was saying, well, we believe you. We believe you. It can work. And it's like, oh, no. And it was literally third time was a charm. The cork went flying. I nearly took out the weatherman. The wine went everywhere. It was like everywhere. The host and I were sort of dancing and hugging in this spray. And then we just went to commercial. It was like, thank God, we're out.
Well, I mean, the amount of videos of people trying to do sabrage. And do you know what? I know how to do it. I am aware. I know it's all about the seam. I know at 45-degree angle. I know that, of course, the bottle needs to be very cold. I know that it's better to go along that seam a few times. And then when you kind of feel it, and bash. But you know what? I've never done it. I have never done it because... You know why? Because I don't want to do it with my own champagne. I don't.
Sure, you got to get a cheap bottle.
Yeah, I know. I need to go and get some cava or something that has enough pressure inside. I would say to people, don't do a Prosecco. It will be too low. You need the full bars of pressure. But yeah, I should just do it and have some fun with it. But I don't want to embarrass myself. But yeah, I should practice.
No, it is nerve-wracking, even when you're just trying it in the backyard. But on TV, it's as live action as TV can get with wine, which is usually, pretty calm. But the studio lights were so hot and my hands were shaking. I think that's why it was not working. It was like, oh no, I did this in the backyard and it worked. But anyway, it all happy ending.
We like that. Good. Well, anyway, I aspire. I'm waiting for somebody to listen in the UK. In fact, we have Loose Women, which is a bunch of women who are generally a whole mix of different types of celebrities. And they sit normally with coffee unless they've got some spirits in there. But there's no wine. But maybe I should just be brave. Send them a message and be like, do you know who I am?
Do you know what I can do for you?
Exactly. I can revolutionize your show. Well, anyway, have a look. Check out Loose Women. It's basically, it seems The View and The Social, but actually without any of the wine. So
I like the name, Loose Women. Sounds like they'd be a fun group of women.
Actually, it is very fun. Now, let's go to your book. So your first book that you've written is Red, White, and Drunk All Over, a wine-soaked journey from grape to glass. Love the name.
Thank you.
If people are going to read this book, where are they going to be taken? Quite clearly to Italy, to the spine, the mountains, the hills.
Yes.
I'm sure, right? Of Italy. But where are they going to go? What are they going to learn?
Well, I love the approach of the new journalists. So Truman Capote, Joan Didion, George Plimpton. What they did was they did day in the life of. They tried to immerse themselves in their subject rather than just reporting on the sidelines. So George Plimpton wrote a book about football, but instead of interviewing all the players, he did play in the NFL for, I don't know if it was a full season or not, but you just dig down deeper and get those insights and feelings of what it's like to do the thing. So I worked as a sommelier in a 5-diamond restaurant, fancy French restaurant. Mistakes were made. But through that, I learned and was able to write about what is good restaurant wine service. How do you decipher a restaurant list? So like my mother used to hide the peas and the mashed potatoes, sort of learning was more palatable than
Yeah.
just straight up, here's 26 steps on, what good restaurant wine service is. So I did a lot of that. I worked in a wine store. I helped Randall Graham, who is a great, witty winemaker in California, Bonnie Doon, worked with him at the Harvest. But I also did all sorts of other things. I traveled to Burgundy and tasted Domaine Romani Conti, and that's not a brag bit, even though it sounds like it. I went down in the cellar with Aubert de Villaine, who's the winemaker owner there, and he made me blind taste he said, turn around.
He made you. He was like, I don't want to do it. I don't want to taste your wine.
It was forced. And he said, he said, what if I left you down here? I said, just leave a corkscrew. I'll be fine. But he had this wine library and they were all webby bottles. And so he said, turn around. I said, okay. And so he pulled a bottle from the shelf. I didn't know where. And he made me guess which vintage as we tasted. So like I was trying to, should I say, well, the rain's in 46, definitely not that year. But I kind of had a sense from the corner of my eye, not that I was peeking, but that he was going around the middle of the rack. And so when I turned around, I could see that was kind of the 1950s. So I just made a stab in the middle, I think it's the 50s. And he's looking really pleased, like, oh, I picked a good student. Anyway, I actually narrowed it down, but only because of luck, not for any sort of skill. But my point to that and the other things that I've done, when I did book readings for this book, they'd say, oh my gosh, you got into, Domaine de Romani Conti. And as I explained to the group, I said, it wasn't me, it was you. It's my readers that I bring with me. That's how I gained entry to all of these places. I do not kid myself in terms of, oh, it's me and whatever. And, to your point, not really royalty. I'm an elected member of the wine people. They voted with their confidence. And it's who I bring with me to these experiences that allow me that kind of entry.
Yeah. Yeah. You're the chief of wine happiness. That's the correct title.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
You can tell from my face. I'm just like, oh, can you imagine being locked down in the cellars of Domaine de Romani Conti? Like, oh no, what are we going to do whilst we wait?
It's a perfect way to go. And you'd be perfectly preserved. You'd be pickled, actually. By the time they got the door open, it was like, oh, so sad, but happy ending.
That is amazing. So people are going to go all the way around, pick up some tips from your journeys and your discoveries, and obviously, hopefully, kind of feel like they were there as well, which is the closest thing. Most people will not get into the cellar of DRC, will they? So
it's true. It's not an open winery.
No.
It doesn't have a tasting room as do wineries in England, Canada, the US. So
for obvious reasons. Well, then tell me about the second book. So the second book, Unquenchable, as we both are. Unquenchable, a tipsy quest for the world's best bargain wine. So I like this one because we've gone from DRC, which is only tasted by a few in the world these days. What are people going to find in this book? I probably already ruined the surprise by the title, right?
No, it's all good. Like, definitely, yeah, this is the antithesis of DRC. I just had enough of all these fine wines. It was like,
oh no, I can't drink cult wines anymore and fine wines that have been aged for 50 years. Ew, disgusting.
I need to be one with the people again.
Yes.
So this was what the common theme is, again, between the two books, is I like to seek out really obsessive winemakers. That's actually not a hard thing to do, as you know. Wine drinkers, makers, etc. We're all kind of obsessive types. So I went to Australia and, Provence and all over the place looking for areas where the value of wine is just off the charts. And often I found it was if you go south. So what I mean by that is, in Italy, Tuscany, Piedmont, they're very cachet brand name wine regions. But if you go south to Sicily, you can get some incredible values. Same thing in France, from Bordeaux, Burgundy, go down to the Languedoc. And
Portugal.
Exactly.
It's true, isn't it?
Even in California, Napa and Sonoma are the brand names, but go down to, Paso Robles, you're going to get better value. So I was looking for that sort of intersection between value and, slightly unhinged winemakers who would tell me things off script and without close PR guardians. So
an eternal struggle, I can imagine these days.
Exactly. So I found them. Wolf Blass in Australia he is a wild man with a lot of energy. And He has this one wine. His labels are pretty much color coded. He was one of the first to do that and make wine a lot more accessible and easy to buy. But he has a red label. It's just called the Wolf Bless red label. He goes, "Oh, I call that the leg opener." And it's like, okay, I don't think I need to probe that. But anyway, we just had a marvelous time. And, Charles back in Fairview, South Africa, he also makes the line Goats du Rhum.
Yes, okay. I was like, why is that name sound familiar? Yep.
Exactly. So that's a play off Côte du Rhône.
Côte du Rhône.
And he had a big standoff with the French wine authorities because they felt he was infringing on copyright. But what he did was he took a busload of his farm workers, vineyard workers, down to the French embassy. And he has all these goats on property. He made me milk a goat because he thought that would go viral on social media, me kneeling, milking a goat. Anyway, he's full of fun. But he told me this story and he said it took a busload of farm workers down to the French embassy. And he goes, "I don't know how CNN found out about it." Wink, wink. But they showed up, and as did a lot of other media. And they sang freedom songs, but then they presented the ambassador of the French embassy with a vacuum sealed package of goat droppings. So he said,
as you do.
The French authorities dropped the lawsuits, but he said to me, "I'd appreciate anything you could do to stir up that controversy again." It was great PR.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Well, no PR is worse than bad PR, as they say, or whatever that saying is.
Exactly.
Have you met Charles Smith from Washington?
I have not. I've heard lots of things about him. Is he in Washington?
Yeah, and you would want him for another book. Like his hair is big and crazy and big, and like Sideshow Bob kind of hair from The Simpsons. And he is literally wild. Apart from the fact, the voluptuousness of his wines, the roundedness, the power, it's almost the explosion of fruit. It sums him up. But I'll always remember, I won't name the place, but he came to a launch of one of his wines. We're in this restaurant and all of a sudden we're talking and he's, he goes to run off and he goes and hides behind a really long curtain.
Really?
With some windows, he's behind this curtain. And I follow him and I'm like, "Why are you behind this curtain?" And he's like, the owner of this specific restaurant, to give you an idea, it's a very cool, funky kind of restaurant, is walking in and he's like, "The last time I was with him, I didn't wake up for 3 days." And I leave it there and let people use their imagination what the hell they got up to.
Wow.
I don't know.
Wine must have been involved.
For sure. So I don't know how much he was exaggerating, but he's definitely a little cray-cray, but energetic and interesting. And just as you were saying, going to Australia, stories that you can have with him, they'll stick with you forever.
Absolutely.
So of these bargain wines, have you got a specific region that you really lean towards, or just a few actual specific wines that people listening may want to go out and seek?
Sure. So I loved visiting Sicily. Anything with a volcano is just magical. It's the power of the earth, and that anytime you might die, perhaps while you're drinking. I don't know.
Nothing like a little bit of danger.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know. I think life, death, eating, satiation, sensory. Anyway, but I loved visiting Sicily. Again, a sun-drenched island in the south of Italy. And they have so many iconic dishes. I mean, pistachios are everywhere. Seafood is fresh. And just the wines. I'm not sure whether volcanic soil makes a huge difference or if it's just a matter of drainage. But there's something about those wines that is special and of the earth and powerful. I mean, the wines are such great value. I mean, they're a fraction of the cost of other more northern Italian wines. I mean, the label that stands out is Cusimano, and the grape is Nero d'Avola, the black grape near Avola, I believe the town. But they're just these luscious, full-bodied, smooth reds. They're gorgeous. So that would be one. Another would be closer to home. Well, actually, I'll save that for later. The Ontario wines. But yeah, the Italian wines stand out. Of course, I loved Provence. I love rosé. I drink it year round. And again, it's those sensory memories. And I was fortunate to share a glass with Peter Mayle, the author of A Year in Provence. And we sat down and had rosé because that's his absolute favorite. I visited him in his small little town, village. And, we're sitting out in the sun on a bistro deck, and it's like, oh, this is just, I want to stay. And I guess it's the associations. I mean, the wine itself, I
Yes.
don't know, wouldn't score 97, but the experience sure would.
So, do you think that being down in Provence may be one of your favorite places to have visited? Or have you got a
Hmm.
specific winery that sticks in your head that's a 97 out of 100?
Winery. Oh, yes, 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 yes. Yeah, I'm trying to think because my mind goes to Ontario again because some of
Yeah.
my most favorite experiences are here. So do ask me about that again. But, visiting the wineries in Italy was wonderful. I mean,
Mm.
Tomasi and,
Oh, so
uh,
you love being in Veneto.
yeah, exactly. Barbie de Fattoria.
Okay. Oh, well, you're talking about all over the place. But yeah, Piemonte, for me, being in La Mora in the Barolo region, up on the hill, looking down because of the
Yes,
amount of vineyards, it's special. And certainly as
it
well in
is.
Tuscany. It's so
Mm.
funny. I remember going from Florence to like just down into the middle of Chianti, and somewhere which probably a few kilometers, like takes an hour because you don't go in a straight line. You like go
No.
around and around and around a hill and up and down. And again, all those olive groves and the cypress trees and little
Yeah.
castles on top of every town. It's special, isn't it? Yeah.
It is, and it does take a long time, especially when you get lost and you have a German bus driver on a one-way road who is swearing in German at the Italian drivers honking coming straight at us and trying to back up a busload of people down a tall hill. It was like,
As
"Oh,
you
that's
do.
fun. We need a drink."
But definitely a memory. Yes.
Yeah,
If they've
exactly.
forgotten the wine on board, then it's not so fun. Oh, dear me. Okay, well, anyway, conclusion for everybody. Do you know what? One, Italy, for sure, of all the places I've been to actually in the world, is like, I swear, every region is just going to blow your mind, but you'll be fine.
It
Most
does.
places where wine grows, there's some beautiful view behind it, isn't there?
There is. I'm so glad, we don't write about plumbing parts or something. We'd be touring dank, wet factories that don't smell so good. We're so privileged to go to the most beautiful places on earth
This is
because of what we
so
do.
true. Talking of beauty, then, what has been the highlight, the most beautiful moment of your wine career so far? Because obviously, I've got a whole long list of all the awards you've won. And I'm wondering if that's going to be, oh, obviously, after your son's birth, of course, that's the highlight, but we're talking
Of
wine.
course. Right. Well, yes, my mind actually didn't go to my son's birth. That was not a
Okay,
highlight.
we'll edit that out. No?
No, no, no. It's all right. Perhaps my first glass of wine after he was born, that was pretty special
I can imagine.
because I had been totally off of it, of course. But yeah, so many memories come back to me, not because the wine was iconic, but because of who I was with, like the friends, the family, just sharing a wine, a quiet moment. I know that's not that sort of peak experience. I did feel like there were some special moments, like being in New York for the James Beard Awards was pretty amazing because for here, they're kind of sort of food and wine Oscars because I had entered based on an article I posted on my own website. And I remember after I won, Jeffrey Steingarten, I don't know if he's still writing, but he was the food columnist for Vogue magazine in New York. He
Hmm.
came up to me and said, "Who the hell are you and where are you from?"
Oh, all right.
He's very funny in a grouchy
Yeah.
way. But
He owns his grumpiness.
he does. He's very
Okay.
funny. But just New York's magical too. I love New York for the restaurants and for the fast pace. And it's like, I always feel like a country mouse in New York, but I love being there because it's like, oh, look at those tall buildings and wow, look at
Mm.
all these people. Anyway,
It's all about just drinking with the right people.
exactly.
Now, talking about people, they can go to your website. Actually, you have quite a lot of free online courses. You have the other courses, they can take things more seriously. But a lot of these courses, they're all about people building confidence in choosing wines by themselves, whether it be in a restaurant, whether it be in a wine shop. So, have you got a tip or two that you can bring to this podcast right now for somebody who's in a wine shop? How can they narrow down their choice?
Sure. I mean, there's a few strategies. When I worked in a wine shop, that's exactly what I was looking for. How do you, as a consumer, not get overwhelmed with this wall of bottles? Because,
Mhm.
I think wine, as you know, Janina, it's unlike any other consumer product category. I mean, you can try an address, you can read the first chapter of a book, but generally you cannot taste the wine before you buy it, at least not legally. So All you've got is a fluffy squirrel or a castle in the middle distance on the label to go on. And that's, 80% of people buy wine based on the label. So what can you do to narrow your odds or increase your odds, I should say? So the go south thing is always good for value in terms of the regions. But I also would suggest talking to the store staff. Usually they're pretty passionate, retail store staff in a wine store, and asking them something like, I generally like a full bodied Cabernet. And if you know the label or the wine name you've had before, can you recommend something similar? So maybe they'll take you over to an Argentine Malbec instead. So it's kind of like the Amazon book buying algorithm. If you like this book, maybe you'll like that book. That's one way to, I think, can help. Another thing you can do is buy a case of wine to sort of de-risk the situation. And what I mean by that is a lot of people go into a liquor store looking for the one perfect bottle to buy. And instead of that, why not, again, tap into the store staff, or if you're too shy, download an app like mine and say, okay, I generally like full-bodied reds in this price range. Go for a variety and then experiment and say, okay, well, we'll try this one. And if it doesn't work, that's fine. So maybe you'll find 2 or 3 new favorites out of a case of 12, but I think it's worth trying.
There's so many grapes in the world, isn't there? And for the typical consumer, they're like,
yeah.
okay, I know my Cab Sav, my Sauvignon Blanc and Chardonnay, so I'll stick with that. And you just think, what about the Grunewald-Linas of the world? You say Sicily
Yes.
with the Nerolo Mascaleses, all these kind of grape varieties that people are like, what the hell? And
Yeah.
they're wonderful, aren't they? So, and you get that
Yes.
when you get these discovery boxes, especially if you get them from a passionate independent wine retailer where they want to bring you these random goodies that you may have never heard of
Exactly.
before. Yeah, absolutely. So if people are tasting wine, they've got their discovery box and now they're tasting a glass of Albarino, whatever it is. Have you got a tip for them in terms of enhancing their tasting skills, or how they would maybe identify that wine blind compared to a Sauvignon Blanc? Who knows?
Sure. I think that consumers or those who take courses from me think you have magical tasting abilities to describe each wine as it is. But the most powerful thing anyone can do, and you obviously don't have to be a professional to do this, is taste wines side by side, and the differences will leap out at you. So most consumers have a glass of wine at a time. But if you want to learn about wine, taste a flight of wines, or like 4 or 5 or however many side by side, like get a flight of all different New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc, or take Sauvignon Blanc from different countries, New
Mm-hmm.
Zealand and the Loire and Canada and so on. And you'll be amazed at how much you'll pick up just because you're going side by side and going back and forth among them. And that's what I do in my courses and then people think, oh my gosh, I really can see the difference. I really do see that I'm getting more herbal notes there. And one's more floral because they're up against each other. And I think that's one of the best things you can do. And I know that sometimes you think, well, how am I going to open 4 or 5 bottles? But there are devices that can preserve wine these days. On my podcast, you showed the Coravin, which is
Yeah.
an excellent device. There's also like the Repour, the thing you can put in just a little cap that will absorb all the oxygen out of a bottle, or get together friends, do a potluck.
Yeah.
Everybody brings a bottle and then you all taste together so that you can taste a variety of wines, or take my course.
Or take your course.
Anyway.
Your course looks fantastic. And I think actually that is really interesting. Like, I was thinking about, what would you recommend for somebody who was planning maybe a wine tasting at home? But I think you've hit the nail on the head doing these kind of flights. And funny enough, literally on Sunday, I am doing a little blind tasting for my mum. So she
Oh,
loves
great.
2 grape varieties. One, she loves, surprise, surprise, Marlborough Sauvignon Blanc. She loves the
Mm.
aromatics and the concentration and all that kind of passion fruit and all this intense, pungent, exotic fruits and grassy notes.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when we last spoke, I mentioned Bacchus, the grape variety from England, and it
Right.
is the closest thing to it could well be Marlborough, New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc.
Hmm.
And so, what I've decided to do, because she loves the 2, is I bought 2 bottles of Bacchus and I bought 1 Sauvignon Blanc from Marlborough, and then I bought a Touraine Sauvignon Blanc. So we talked about very good value wines. For anyone who doesn't know, Touraine is quite a large region, but it's in the Loire Valley, slightly west from Sancerre and Puy-Formé, the places where they make the super premium Sauvignon Blancs. But Touraine itself tends to be the most exotic and pungent and aromatic of all the Sauvignon Blancs in the Loire Valley. So sometimes it can get mixed up in a blind tasting with Marlborough New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc. So to play around with it all, I want them to guess which two are Bacchus, which one is the Marlborough Sauvignon Blanc, and which one is the French Sauvignon Blanc. And of course, ideally be able to see they're all different, but at the same time, actually realize that there are quite a few similarities. So it kind of brings them together, because I think that's quite fun as well, and confusing.
Oh, that's
but
brilliant.
Hey,
Great idea.
Yeah.
Yes.
So anyway, so there we go, everyone. Either get a flight of one grape variety all around the world, find two varieties that have maybe similarities, like Chardonnay and Chenin Blanc could be
Yes. Great
another
idea.
one, both with amazing acidity, and both can take a lot of oak, but also be without oak. And for me, I'm always looking for a bit of quince or a bit of beeswax or honey note with the Chenin to try and differentiate it, but I muck it up
Lovely.
all the time. I'm terrible at blind tasting.
Great idea. Oh, but those are great ideas to set them up. You know, you'll learn a lot.
Absolutely. Well, there you go, everyone. Now, if we are tasting from wine glasses, I love Zalto. Obviously, here it costs £40 a glass. It's not like you can buy too many of them. And of course, it's tragic when you smash them. Do you have a favorite wine glass?
Salto. Sorry. I'd like to have a range, but you know, I do love them. I wish I were on commission. I'm not, but I've got the universal here and I call it the big ass glass for Pinot Noir, but I just love them because they're so light and just so, I don't know, there's something about them. Why do you think so many of us love these glasses as opposed to, I mean, there's many good brands, Riedel, Spiegelau, and so on.
I also have, and I talk a lot with people about, I've got Gabrielle Glass, which is the hand-blown golden edition. I've got that and I really like that as well.
Okay.
I think Zalto, it's so light. So the feel of it on your mouth is just beautiful. And when you hold it, you feel like you're holding nothing. I really think it probably is one of the lightest glasses out there. But at the same time, I've seen them kind of move it to show that it actually can bend and not break. I'm not that I really want to risk doing that. Yeah, because they're not as easy to break as you think. And
I'm not sure I believe that. I've gone through so many. Oh, no.
But there are probably other, well, you shouldn't call them factories, handmade places that are producing these wonderful glasses. But Zalto has got it right and has got the marketing behind it probably. So there's got to be a few others. But you just know that you're getting that quality every time, aren't you, with Zalto?
Yeah, I love them.
Another thing you love, you talk about pairing, because a lot of your education is pairing food and wine together. One of your courses is actually on cheeses. I think you pair 25 cheeses with wine, which is just amazing.
Yes.
So for anyone who says, oh, I'm just going to get a bottle of red and cheese, like, no, it could be far, far more interesting than that. And have you got a favorite specific cheese and wine pairing that you want to tell people?
I have a few.
You're allowed a few.
Yeah, I do. So I love experimenting with different types of rinds, the exterior of the cheese. So you get rinds that are edible. And one of my favorite is a Merlot washed rind. And of course, it's going to go beautifully with a Merlot, but of other reds too. It doesn't have to be Merlot. It could be a Malbec or a Cabernet or something like that. Another classic that's easy to find is like a oozing creamy brie that's warm and just lava flowing over like a crusty baguette. And then you can do two things. You can either cut through the fat so you can contrast with a Gruner Veltliner or a zesty white or a Sauvignon Blanc. There's lots of acidity. Or you can ooze into it and go like with like a buttery Chardonnay with that creamy brie. And then the last one, I always love to explore weird cheeses like mimolette. I don't know if you've had that one.
No,
Janina.
mimolette, no.
Well, it tastes somewhat like cheddar. It's nuttier, but the backstory is going to sound gross, but it's actually good. Little mites eat away at the cheese and they produce the flavors in the cheese. So it's got all of this sort of, you know, those little, when you bite into mature cheddar, it's got those little, not rocks, but little,
it's crunchy almost.
Crunchy
it's really
bits.
Good.
Yeah. It's like the protein or the amino
Mhm.
acids or whatever. And those are little tiny explosions of flavor. You're not eating the mites, but it's got these gorgeous flavors as it ages. And I just love like a Syrah that's also aged and got the smoky flavor. So you wrap that smoke into these sort of nutty flavors of the cheese, and it's gorgeous. So people love exploring these different flavors, but also, with any food, including cheese, one really great thing to do, and it's simple, is take a taste of the wine first. Always taste your wine first, then take a bite of the cheese, then go back to the wine, and you'll be amazed at
How
how
it
your
changes.
perception of that wine changes.
I love that. Now, to
Yeah.
finish off on the pairing and book theme of this episode, as you, of course, are into writing, I've got 3 books for you, which actually I picked because they're also films, so people will actually understand what it is. So the 3 books, and I
Right.
want you to tell me the perfect wine that they should be drinking, in your opinion, to go with the book. So if somebody
Okay.
is reading Game of Thrones by George
Mm.
R. Martin, if you'll ever finish the last book. But anyway, if you were reading that book, what would you drink with Game of Thrones?
Well, they do have their own line of wines, but I would go for something more full bodied
Mhm.
than what they produce, the name brand wines. Something like an Italian Amarone. It's full bodied,
really
it's got
intense.
depth.
Okay,
Yeah, it's
yes.
intense like the show. It's layered, it's got lots of flavor. It also has a bitter finish. Now, it's a pleasant bitter finish, but for fans
That's
of the
good.
books, yeah, for the fans of the books who did not like the ending, an Amarone is best because it kind of ends bitterly. Like we want a little bit of a remake there. But anyway, so
Love
yes, that's what I
that.
would go with.
I just love it. This is why I wanted to ask you this. Okay, right. Slight change. Alice's Adventure in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll.
Oh, I love that book. Oh, I
Mhm.
love that book. And you know, my favorite part is when Alice sees that bottle and it says, "Drink me." It's
Mm.
like, that's my life too, except I'm in wine land. I'm not in Wonderland. Anyway,
Uh-huh.
so I would go with something much more light and playful and delightful. I would go with a Riesling, an off-dry Riesling, because it would pair beautifully with all of the crustless sandwiches and dainties at the Mad Hatter's Tea Party.
Oh, do you know what? Alice in Wonderland, everything. I should do like an Alice in Wonderland themed podcast, like an
Wouldn't that be
episode, and just
great?
see how I can. Yeah, it
Yes,
just so
and
we
you could do all the food pairings too. Like, take a look at what was served at that tea party. It's
and
delightful.
I'll just act as the Mad Hatter. I think that is a role that would suit me well. And
Exactly.
now, for the lovers, The Notebook by Nicholas Sparks.
All right. Well, I was going to suggest something goopy, but I'm not a romantic. No, I'm kidding. I've been through a divorce, so I'm hardened. But I would go with, no, I'm kidding. I
Another
found love
episode,
again.
another
It's all
episode.
right. It's all happy ever after. But of course, we have to go with Pinot Noir, the heartbreak grape, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Classic. Pinot Noir, of course, is called the heartbreak grape because it's so difficult to make. It's sensitive to everything: rain, mildew, pests, voices above a whisper in the vineyard. It seems it's just really sensitive and cranky. But when it works, it's beautiful. It's a sublime wine. It's my go-to wine to drink personally. And
it has elegance.
so I would definitely go with that.
It
Yes.
has beauty. Yeah. And it can be all different shades in a way, depending on if you get it right or wrong. So
Exactly. So 50 Shades of Grey or whatever.
Oh, no.
That.
Did not bring that
so
book in. Didn't bring that book in. You can't bring that up. Oh my God. Amazing. Right. To finish off on this, I just want you to tell everybody what your website is so they can go to that, and they'll also find your podcast on there, online wine courses, your blogs, your articles, where they can get the books from. So what is the website?
Thank you so much. So it's nataliemaclean.com. It's my name, NATALIEMACLEAN, nataliemaclean.com. And yeah, you can get connected there to the Unreserved Wine Talk podcast, my online food and wine pairing courses, the books, and everything else.
Many more. Everything you've ever wanted.
And more.
Now, next week is part 2 with the very amusing and interesting Natalie. And we're going to be taking things closer to home. Well, Natalie's home. We are off to Canada with a big focus on the Ontario wine region and ice wine. Now, to finish this episode, and in dedication to our love of wine and books, I have the ideal quote to finish off with, and it's by Molière, who was a French playwright. And he said, Great is the fortune of he who possesses a good bottle, a good book, and a good friend.
Well, there you have it. I hope you enjoyed my chat with Janina. In the show notes, you'll find my email contact, a full transcript of my conversation with Janina, links to her podcast and website, how you can join me in a free online wine and food pairing class, and where you can find the live stream video version of these conversations on Facebook and YouTube Live every Wednesday at 7 p.m. That's all in the show notes at nataliemaclean.com/179. Email me if you have a sip, tip, question, or would like to be a beta reader of my new memoir at natalie@nataliemaclean.com. You won't want to miss next week when we continue our chat with Janina. In the meantime, if you missed episode 44, go back and take a listen. I chat about pairing spicy food and wine, with some great tips if you're celebrating Cinco de Mayo, the 5th of May, with some spicy Mexican fare. I also discuss Gen X versus millennial drinkers. I'll share a short clip with you now to whet your appetite.
The flavors that survive heat are sweet and sour. That's why both crisp and slightly sweet wines can cool the palate after a fiery onslaught. So you think about wines like Riesling and Muscat, especially those from cool climates like Germany, Canada, Alsace, where the wine preserves its refreshing acidity. These wines are the equivalent of diving into the ocean after getting a sunburn, invigorating and soothing for your tongue. Long after you've swallowed, their silver thread of acidity lasts as long as that hot wire of spice in your mouth. They also have complementary aromas and flavors of spices, limes, lemons, green apples, and flowers. Think about the garnishes that often tame the heat in spicy dishes. You'll find those aromas in the wines that go best with them.
If you liked this episode, please tell one friend about it this week, especially someone you know who'd be interested in the wines and stories we discussed. Thank you for taking the time to join me here. I hope something great is in your glass this week, perhaps a full-bodied Italian wine.
You don't want to miss one juicy episode of this podcast, especially the secret, full-bodied bonus episodes that I don't announce on social media. So, subscribe for free now at nataliemaclean.com/subscribe. Meet me here next week. Cheers.